Across the continent, we face increasing asymmetry and transnational threats, from terrorism and armed conflict to cybercrime and environmental degradation.
Africa is at a turning point. On one side stands a new wave of Pan-African leaders like Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, calling for a sovereign and united continent. On the other, long-established leaders like Kenya's President William Ruto, walking a delicate path between local interests and global alliances.
Captain Ibrahim Traoré just dropped a political thunderbolt that has shaken African leadership to its core. In a powerful message directed at Kenyan President William Ruto, Traoré didn't mince words, calling out double standards, foreign dependency, and weak leadership. While some are stunned, others are applauding him for saying what so many are afraid to say.
Africa is at a turning point. On one side stands a new wave of Pan-African leaders like Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, calling for a sovereign and united continent. On the other, long-established leaders like Kenya's President William Ruto, walking a delicate path between local interests and global alliances. In this video, we explore the unfolding drama sparked by a simple visit, Captain Traoré's envoy arriving in Kenya just days after US General Langley met with Ruto. What does it mean for the African struggle? Is this a message of unity or a warning?
This wasn't just a speech. It was a wake-up call to African heads of state to stop bowing to Western powers and start standing for the people. Was it a warning to Ruto or a call for unity? Either way, Africa is listening.
Being here for the 80th anniversary of the victory over Nazism, and having taken part in yesterday's parade, as well as some cultural events the day before, has been a truly insightful experience. It has taught us many things, prompting deep reflection and inspiring us to revitalize the African continent. Today, many peoples are fighting for their survival, for their sovereignty, to live in peace.
Traoré's bold stand at the Russia-Africa Summit. Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't mince words at the Russia-Africa Summit. Clad in military fatigues and his trademark red beret, he stood before 17 African leaders and asked, how can Africa, with so much wealth, become the poorest continent in the world today? And why do African leaders travel the world to beg? His blunt questions pierced through the usual diplomatic pleasantries, shaking the room with their brutal honesty. It wasn't just a speech, it was a confrontation. Traoré called out the political class across the continent, demanding accountability and self-respect. His boldness startled many, including Kenya's President William Ruto, whose country remains dependent on Western aid and foreign loans. But while some leaders bristled, Africa's youth were inspired. Online, the clip of his remarks spread like wildfire. Young Africans, tired of seeing their leaders kowtow to foreign powers, found a voice in Traoré. His call for self-sufficiency, paired with his critique of foreign dependency, resonated deeply. He reminded the world that Africa's problems stem not from lack of resources, but from poor leadership and misplaced priorities. His use of Russia's grain donation as a symbolic gesture underscored his point. Africa should not rely on handouts when it holds immense potential within. Traoré wasn't just speaking as a president, he was speaking as a son of Africa, tired of seeing his continent kneel.
I told you that a 34-year-old military captain with no economic degree took over one of the poorest countries in Africa and in just 2 years increased its GDP by over 17%, paid off national debts and launched the biggest infrastructure revolution in the country's history. And what if I told you that he did all this while refusing the presidential salary, rejecting IMF loans, and telling Western powers to back off?
Economic reforms and sovereignty. One of Traoré's boldest moves has been rejecting the grip of global financial institutions. Early in his presidency, he turned down loans from the IMF and World Bank, institutions that have long held African economies hostage with predatory interest rates and backdoor influence. Africa doesn't need the World Bank, the IMF, Europe, or America, he declared. This wasn't bravado. It was a policy shift. Burkina Faso's economy, under his leadership, grew from $18.8 billion in 2022 to $22.1 billion in 2024, a remarkable leap for a nation that once teetered on the edge of economic collapse. Unlike other nations that increased taxes and public debt, Traoré slashed ministerial and parliamentary salaries by 30% and hiked civil servant pay by 50%. The symbolism was powerful, leaders sacrificing comfort while uplifting the working class. He also prioritized paying off domestic debts, ensuring local businesses could thrive without bureaucratic red tape or cash flow nightmares. This economic sovereignty laid the groundwork for a more resilient Burkina Faso. Instead of begging for crumbs, Traoré is baking his own bread. His economic approach has proven that with the right vision and courage, African nations can chart their own course. While critics scoffed, calling it risky or naive, Traoré proved them wrong with numbers, impact, and unmatched public support. He didn't just change policies, he changed the narrative. Agricultural initiatives and food security. Traoré didn't just talk sovereignty, he planted it, quite literally. Understanding that food independence is the bedrock of true freedom, he launched an agricultural revolution. Nearly 200,000 smallholder farmers received government support in the form of high-yield seeds, farming equipment, and irrigation technology. This wasn't charity, it was investment. Within just 2 seasons, Burkina Faso saw a 15% jump in cereal production, drastically reducing its reliance on imported grains. Traoré also introduced processing plants for tomatoes and cotton, ensuring that raw materials were no longer exported cheaply, only to be re-imported as overpriced finished goods. These projects created local jobs, kept money circulating within communities, and empowered farmers who had been sidelined for decades. But Traoré didn't stop at policy. He visited farms, met with cooperatives, and even rolled up his sleeves to work the land, a gesture that earned him immense respect from rural communities. His message was clear: Burkina Faso will feed itself. And as droughts and global food shocks continue to impact the continent, Traoré's proactive planning stands as a blueprint. Where other leaders saw crisis, he saw opportunity. Where others begged for food aid, he taught people to grow their own. That's not just leadership, it's legacy. And the seeds Traoré is planting today are shaping the harvest of tomorrow.
Collaboration with the Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA. The project goes far beyond patching up old roads. It's about transforming how Burkina Faso connects its cities, moves goods, and makes daily life easier for its people, especially in a landlocked country where good roads matter most. With the Dono method already being rolled out in Ouagadougou and Bobo Dioulasso, the big question is, how will this change Burkina Faso's road system?
Infrastructure development and connectivity. For Traoré, roads and runways aren't just concrete and asphalt, they're arteries of independence. Realizing that development dies in isolation, he launched an ambitious infrastructure drive focused on uniting the nation and jump-starting the economy. Over 3,000 kilometers of rural roads have been constructed under his watch, finally connecting forgotten villages to thriving markets. These aren't just dirt paths, they're lifelines for farmers, traders, and entrepreneurs who now save time and money getting their goods to urban centers. Logistics costs have dropped by up to 25%, and regional trade is booming. The crown jewel of Traoré's plan, the Ouagadougou-Donson Airport, slated for completion in 2025, which is expected to serve over 1 million passengers annually. More than a travel hub, it represents Burkina Faso's bold step onto the global stage. Traoré has also begun investing in digital infrastructure, understanding that connectivity in the 21st century isn't just about roads. It's about broadband, mobile access, and e-commerce. These investments have opened new doors for youth-led businesses and tech startups, pushing Burkina Faso toward a diversified digital economy. Every kilometer paved under Traoré carries a message. Burkina Faso is open for business, and it's doing things on its own terms. It's not just about moving goods, it's about moving forward, fast and fearless.
No other African leader has survived over 15 assassination attempts in just 2 years. Since seizing power, Traoré has lived under constant threat, one failed coup after another. This isn't just political instability, it's a full-scale war on a man whose vision has become larger than himself. While some attribute the danger to the nature of military leadership, it's worth asking, Why haven't other Sahelian military rulers, like those in Mali, Niger, Chad, or Gabon?
Security measures and territorial integrity. When Traoré took office, Burkina Faso was bleeding from insurgent wounds. Large swaths of territory were under militant control, but Traoré, a soldier first, approached the crisis not just with firepower, but with a plan. He prioritized reclaiming every inch of Burkinabe soil, not just for the map, but for the people. His administration increased the defense budget by 30%, modernized equipment, and retrained troops to better confront evolving threats. But the masterstroke? Integrating local fighters through the Volunteers for the Defense of the Fatherland, VDP. These weren't just militia members, they were citizens defending their homes. Traoré equipped, trained, and coordinated them with the National Army, creating a unified front that has since reclaimed 25% of previously lost territory. This wasn't about optics, it was about survival. Communities once under siege are rebuilding, schools are reopening, and people are returning home. Unlike leaders who hide in palaces, Traoré visited conflict zones, breaking bread with fighters and listening to local grievances. His hands-on leadership inspired a morale boost rarely seen in conflict zones. He didn't just restore borders, he restored belief. Under Traoré, security is no longer outsourced or ignored. It's personal. And the message is crystal clear. Burkina Faso will not be bullied, fragmented, or controlled. Not on his watch.
The three military rulers have pledged to support each other against outside threats and internal security challenges. But can they find success by going it alone? Or will a divided Sahel region make regional challenges even more difficult to tackle?
Three leaders united in their isolation. Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso have announced their withdrawal from ECOWAS. That was after the West African regional bloc suspended them, citing their recent military takeovers.
Formation of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. Regional unity often dies in bureaucracy, but Traoré, along with Mali and Niger, lit a match under decades of diplomatic inertia. In 2024, they formed the Alliance of Sahel States, a bold, sovereign response to decades of dependency on ECOWAS and foreign alliances that delivered more press releases than results. AES isn't just symbolic. It's a working military and economic confederation. Joint forces now patrol shared borders. Intelligence sharing is the norm. Trade barriers among the trio are being dismantled. And perhaps most symbolically, all three nations began paying for goods and services in local currencies instead of the CFA franc, a colonial relic still backed by France. For Traoré, AES represents a clean slate, one where Africans make decisions for Africans. The alliance isn't just about proximity, it's about shared pain, shared struggle, and a shared dream of autonomy. Together, they're building infrastructure, coordinating on food security, and investing in regional education programs. Ruto and other African leaders watching from the sidelines can't ignore it. This isn't just a power block, it's a paradigm shift. AES, under Traoré's influence, isn't waiting for permission from the West. It's rewriting the rules. And as more nations eye the alliance with interest, it becomes clear. The era of African submission is ending. The age of African agency has begun.
Build wells in our villages while your corporations drain our rivers. You donate vaccines yet patent the cures. You speak of climate action yet continue to fund the very forces that burn our forests and dry our lakes. What kind of generosity is this? The kind that feeds the mouth but silences the voice. The kind that keeps a man alive just enough to keep him dependent. We are not blind to this hypocrisy. Let me be clear, we are not ungrateful for sincere humanitarian assistance, but we reject a global order that disguises exploitation as partnership. We reject financial institutions that lend with one hand and steal sovereignty with the other. Africa no longer wants charity.
Rejection of neo-colonial influence. If there's one thing Traoré is allergic to, it's foreign control disguised as cooperation. Since assuming power, he has waged a quiet war against neo-colonialism. French troops? Ordered out. French media? Restricted. Western NGOs? Investigated for overreach. His actions weren't rash, they were rooted in principle. For too long, Burkina Faso had served as a pawn in the geopolitical chessboard of Western powers. Traoré flipped the board. He demanded that all foreign involvement, military, economic, and media, be based on mutual respect and national interest. His confrontation with France sent ripples across Africa. Leaders either whispered their agreement or squirmed under the spotlight of his boldness. But he didn't care for applause. He cared for sovereignty. With each act of defiance, Traoré proved that a small landlocked nation could stand up to global giants. He inspired a generation tired of being patronized. Young Africans now see him as a symbol of resistance against the lingering ghosts of colonial rule. And while critics label him a populist, the people call him a patriot. In the face of international backlash, Traoré remained steadfast. Because for him, leadership isn't about winning friends abroad. It's about earning respect at home. And that's exactly what he's done. Inspiring a new generation of African leaders. Traoré isn't just shaping Burkina Faso, he's shaping Africa's future. At 36, he represents a new wave of leadership, young, fearless, and unbought. His rise has electrified the continent, proving that real change doesn't come from aged politicians reciting old promises. It comes from those who dare to challenge everything. In universities and urban centers, young Africans quote his speeches. In rural villages, farmers praise his agricultural reforms. Across the diaspora, he's become a symbol of African pride. Traoré's authenticity, his refusal to play the diplomatic game of Western approval, has made him relatable and revered. He leads with conviction, not calculation. Other African leaders are taking note. You can see it in the way they now talk about sovereignty, local economies, and security. The Traoré effect is real. It's not just rhetoric, it's a rising standard. He challenges his peers to be brave, to act in the interest of their people, not foreign donors. Traoré is more than a president, he's a precedent. And if his boldness continues to spread, the next decade in Africa could look very different. One where power is no longer centralized in foreign capitals, but grows from the ground up. A new Africa is rising, and it's wearing a red beret. As Traoré's bold message echoes across the continent, the reactions are mixed. But the impact is undeniable. He's not here to please elites, he's here to protect Africa's future. While some leaders hesitate in the face of global pressure, Traoré stands firm, reminding the world that true leadership demands courage. Whether Ruto responds or not, the ball has been set in motion. Africa's youth are watching, and they're inspired. Traoré's message is clear. Africa must rise together or fall divided, and with each bold move, he's proving he's not just a captain, he's becoming a symbol.